Hey friends, I want to kick things off by sharing with you a scene from one of my all-time favorite TV shows, Parks and Recreation. Now this scene has two characters. This is Tom and this is Jean-Ralphio, and they are best friends. Now in this scene, Tom and Jean-Ralphio are working together on a business proposal so they can get funding for their startup. Tom wants to spend the evening working and preparing for a pitch to Ron the next day. Jean-Ralphio has no interest in working and wants to go clubbing instead. Here's their conversation. Ron loves my entrepreneurial spirit. Trust me, he's our best chance at getting startup money. I hear that. Let's go clubbing. No, we gotta work. Didn't you hear me say we gotta junk most of the presentation? Tommy, I will always be there for you, no matter what. But right now, I cannot be there for you because I have to go. I hate to say this, but sometimes you gotta work a little so you can ball a lot. That was beautiful. That changed me. I'll give you 10 minutes. And Tom's like, what? Now I want to focus in on what Tom says at the end to Jean-Ralphio. He says, sometimes you gotta work a little so you can ball a lot. And I feel like that is what building CI/CD pipelines is like, right? You got to hunker down, you got to put in the work to craft the automation so you can ball a lot and your app development speed can really fly. And that's what we're going to talk about here today, how you can put in a little bit of work and use the example code I'm going to give you in order to build CI/CD pipelines for your app. Now, before we dive in, let me introduce myself. My name is Lauren Schaefer. I began my career at IBM, where I spent 8 years as a software engineer. I currently work as a developer advocate at MongoDB, where my job is to help developers be successful as they use the MongoDB platform. You can find me on both Twitter and TikTok with the handle Lauren_Schaefer. Yes, I'm on TikTok. I'm one of those annoying millennials who thought that quarantine was a great time to join TikTok, and I haven't left. I'm having a lot of fun with it, so look for me there. Now, my goal for this presentation is for you to feel confident you have the knowledge and resources that you need in order to build a CI/CD pipeline for your Realm applications. Because ultimately, we want you to be able to ball a lot. So how are we going to do that? Well, here's the plan. Here's our agenda. We're going to kick things off by getting on the same page with some key terms and technology. And then I'm going to show you a mobile app that some of my colleagues built. And then I'm going to show you the pipeline that I built using GitHub Actions. And then I'm going to wrap things up by discussing how to kickstart building your pipeline. So let's get on the same page with terminology. Now, I've been throwing around terms like pipeline, and maybe you're sitting there thinking, what do you mean? Okay, so let's talk about it. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, and then either continuous delivery or continuous deployment. Today, I'm going to be using CI/CD to refer to continuous integration and continuous deployment. Continuous integration refers to the practice of continuously integrating developer code in order to avoid conflicts. Continuous deployment refers to the practice of frequently deploying software. Now, in order to benefit from CI/CD, you need to have a lot of automated tests that your team trusts. If those tests pass, your code is going to automatically be deployed to production. A CI/CD pipeline is a series of steps and automation that move you through from development all the way to production. So perhaps you're asking yourself, should I care about CI/CD? Yes, you should care about CI/CD. CI/CD has a variety of benefits, including faster releases, which means you're getting value to your end users quicker. Smaller releases, which can help you find bugs faster. And fewer manual tasks because you automate things like testing and deployment, which can reduce manually created errors. And there are a lot of other benefits of CI/CD as well. Now, there are a variety of tools you can use for building your pipeline. I chose to use GitHub Actions. I like it because it works well with GitHub, which is where my code is already. Plus, it has a free plan for public repos, and I like free things. Now you'll see GitHub Actions in my pipeline demo in just a few minutes. Now last term for you today, MongoDB Realm. MongoDB Realm empowers mobile developers to quickly build highly performant cross-platform apps that sync in real time and work even when offline. Realm has a variety of features for both web and mobile apps. Today we're going to be focusing on the mobile side of things. However, the concepts and principles I show you today will apply to both mobile and web applications. All right, now that we're on the same page with terminology, let me show you the app that I built my CI/CD pipeline for. Now this is an app that some of my colleagues built. Unlike Tom, they did not make the app out of paper. They built an actual real-life iOS app. So let's take a look. Here it is. Now, this is a pretty simple iOS app that allows store employees to manage their store's inventory. So let me log in, and we can see this is the inventory for store number 101. So we can see currently we've got blush, eyeliner, pink lipstick, red lipstick. You know, I guess the store sells makeup, okay? I was in the mood to talk about makeup. We can come in, we can add a new item to the inventory. Say we've got a new mascara that's just come in. Let's say the price is $12 and we got a big case of 30 tubes of mascara. So I can click save and we can see the mascara is now listed. Now I can easily adjust the quantities. I can say, oh, we've got, you know, a new shipment. It came with 5 things of eyeliner and maybe we sold 2 of the pink lipsticks. Now, when I do that, the information is being updated in the app's embedded Realm database. Now, since this iPhone is connected to the internet, Realm Sync is automatically updating the associated Atlas database. If you're not familiar with Atlas, Atlas is MongoDB's fully managed database as a service. Now, I've pulled up Atlas on the right side of the screen. I'm going to scroll over a bit and we can take a look at the collection where this data is being stored. Now let me refresh the data. Hopefully if everything works, yep, there's our mascara. And let's see, our pink lipstick, we took 2 out and we can see the quantity was reduced to 12. So I can come back in, let's say we sell another mascara. I can come back over here, I can refresh my database and hopefully, yep, our quantity's been reduced as well. So the syncing between the phone and the Atlas database is all being handled through Realm Sync. This is super handy because Realm Sync handles all those tricky issues like what to do if the phone goes offline, but the data is updated inside the app. All right, so that's a quick look at what this inventory app does. So now that you know what my app does, I want to give you a high-level look at the system architecture. And this is going to help you understand why I built the pipeline the way that I did. Now this system has 3 major pieces. Up at the top, we have the inventory app. This is the iOS app that will be installed on the mobile device. The local Realm database is embedded in the inventory app. The inventory app is connected to the Realm app. Now I want to point out something here that can trip people up. The mobile app is not the Realm app. They are 2 separate things with 2 different code bases. The term Realm app refers to the central MongoDB Realm backend instance for your mobile or web application. In this case, the Realm app utilizes Realm features like authentication, rules, schema, GraphQL, and sync. Realm Sync is what talks to the Atlas database and keeps the data in sync between Atlas and the mobile applications. As you saw a moment ago, the Atlas database is where the inventory data is stored. So in my case, and it'll be your case as you start building your CI/CD pipeline for a Realm app, you'll need to take into consideration how you're going to build and deploy both the inventory app and the Realm app. You'll also need to figure out how you're going to indicate which database the Realm app should be syncing to. Now don't worry, I've got some strategies. I'm going to show you how to do this. All right, that's enough boring stuff. Now that you know about the inventory app, let's get to the fun stuff, the CI/CD pipeline. Now, before I show you the pipeline in action, I want to answer the question, what is the flow of a CI/CD pipeline for Realm apps? I'm going to show you the flow that I created, and you can use this as a basis for your pipeline and tweak it to fit your team's process. Now, my pipeline has 3 main stages. It's got development, staging, and production. Let's talk about what each stage is and what happens as you move from one stage to the next. Now, development is the first stage. This is a stage where I'm going to do my development work, where I'm going to do my coding. So let's say I want to change the color of the login button. So what I want to do is edit this code locally. So I'm going to use Xcode, which you can see here. Now, instead of setting the color button to blue, let's set it to pink. Let me save that, and let's see if we can get a preview running here. Okay, wow, that is a bright pink button even for me, but let's roll with it anyway. Now, I want to make sure this change doesn't break anything. So what I can do is kick off my automated tests. All right, so those will take just a minute to run. So what I'm doing is running my unit and UI tests implemented using XCTest. You could also choose to write tests using Quick and Nimble. All right, looks like the tests, okay, my build succeeded and my tests are running. All right, my test succeeded. We're in good shape. Okay, what I might also want to do is kick off the simulator so I can do some manual testing. Okay, looks good. I mean, if you consider the shade of pink good, but it's working, right? Okay, so that takes care of the mobile app piece. Recall that this application also has a Realm app. Now, I like working in VS Code, so that's where I'm going to do my editing. Now, I could choose to write some unit tests for my Realm app and run them here. If I want to do integration testing or manual testing, I'm going to need to deploy the Realm app. Now, there are a few different ways you can deploy changes to your Realm app. Now, instead of working with the code locally on your machine, you could choose to work with the app inside of the Realm web UI and make changes there. Very soon, Realm's going to allow you to commit the changes you make here in the web UI to your GitHub repo so they don't get lost. And that's going to make working in the web UI a lot easier. I'm going to stick with working locally in my code editors for now. So when you're working with the code locally, one option to deploy your Realm app is using the Realm command line interface. So you could do something like Realm CLI import, and that would actually deploy the app for you. Now, what I've chosen to do for my pipeline is configure a GitHub action that runs whenever I push changes to a branch. So let me show you how this works. What I'm going to do is create a new branch just for this feature. So what I'm going to do is create a new branch called pink button. All right. And then I'm going to stage my changes. I can come in and take a look at my change, changing just the background color of the button. That looks good. I'd add a helpful commit message like change button color. I could commit them, and then I'm going to push those changes to my repo. So let's take a look at what's happening inside of GitHub Actions. All right. Here we can see that a workflow has already been kicked off. That's the name of my commit I just created, right? Now this workflow is going to take a few minutes, so through the magic of editing, I'm just going to skip ahead to when the workflow is finished. Wow, that was a fast workflow. Let's take a look at what happened. So I'll open it up. Let's take a look at the build job. So this workflow kicks off with some setup steps, and then it checks out the branch. This means that the workflow will have access to my latest code changes. Next up, the workflow creates some environment variables. The workflow stores a copy of the current time in a variable, and you'll see how this is used a little later. Then it checks if the workflow is pushing to the main branch or the staging branch. It's not. So you can see that these steps are skipped by the slash icon to the left of the step name. This is a push to the feature branch. So this step checks to see if a Realm app already exists for this particular feature branch. This is a brand new feature branch. It's our first time pushing to it. So a new Realm app will be created later in the workflow. All right, I'm going to skip discussing steps that are skipped, but don't worry, I'll explain what's happening in those when they are run later on in a future workflow. All right, next, the workflow is going to install the Realm CLI. Remember, that's the command line interface. So the workflow installs the Realm CLI and authenticates. Let's scroll a bit. Next, the workflow is going to use the Realm CLI to deploy the code to a brand new Realm app. That Realm app is going to be associated with a brand new Atlas database. Next, the workflow is going to create a new file named realmappid.txt. This file goes in the middle of the mobile app code. The sole purpose of this file is to tell the mobile app which Realm app it should be connecting to. Next, the workflow is going to build the mobile app and run the tests on a variety of simulators. If you have integration tests between the mobile app and the Realm app, you'd want to add a step to run tests against prior releases of the mobile app to ensure backwards compatibility between your new Realm app and older versions of the mobile app. All right, then the workflow is going to do some cleanup and it's done. The nice thing here is that simply by pushing my code changes to my feature branch, my Realm app was deployed and the tests were run. All right, now I'm done with the development stage and I'm ready to start preparing for moving my code to staging. So how am I going to do that? What I'm going to do is create a pull request. So I'm going to head back to GitHub. If I go back to the home page, we can see GitHub actually knows what I want to do. It says you recently pushed some changes here. Do you want to create a pull request? Yes, I do. So what I want to do is request to move changes from my pink button branch to the staging branch of my current branch. So let me find staging here of my current repo. There we go. All right, so what I want to do is leave a helpful comment here like change button color to hideous shade of pink. I'm going to assign this pull request to myself, indicate that I'm the one who wrote the code. And then I'm going to request a review from a teammate. So I might request a review from Andrew Morgan because he wrote the app code. He'd be a great person to review this. If I scroll down a bit, we can see my code changes. It's just changing a color from pink to blue. This looks good. So I'm going to create a pull request. Now, when I create the pull request, GitHub Actions is actually going to automatically kick off another workflow for me. So I'll be back in just a moment when the workflow completes. I am back and the workflow has finished. Now this workflow looks very similar to the one you just saw, so I'm just going to highlight the differences. All right, let's take a look at set environment variables for all other runs. First, the workflow creates an environment variable that indicates a Realm app is going to be dynamically generated just for this workflow. Then, this step uses Realm environments and environment values. Now, just to be super clear, Realm environments and values are different from the environment variables I talked about in earlier steps. I'm now talking about Realm environments and Realm environment values. Now, Realm environments are new, so let's talk about them. Environments enable you to set different values for your Realm app based on what environment that Realm app is running in. For example, you might want to use one database name for production and a different database name for development. As you can see, this app is currently running in the development environment. Now, you can choose to set the environment values here inside the Realm UI, or you can set them in your code, which is what I'm doing inside of the GitHub Actions workflow. So this step in the workflow creates a Realm environment value for the database name. The database name includes a timestamp to ensure that the database name is unique for every pull request. This step also updates the Realm config.json file to indicate that this Realm app should use the testing environment. So now all the environment values have been set for this workflow. All right, then the workflow uses the Realm CLI to create a brand new Realm app just for this pull request. That Realm app is going to be associated with a brand new Atlas database. Then it's going to run the tests and it's going to do some cleanup. All right, I'm going to head back to my pull request. As you can see, the results are displayed in the pull request. So here I would pause and wait for my reviewer, Andrew, to come in and take a look. He'd probably double check that the build did pass and also go in and take a look at the files change tab, see if he agrees with my code changes. We could go back and forth here a couple times until we agree that the code is in good shape. When the code is ready, my teammate is going to approve the pull request and then squash and merge the commits. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete the branch here since I'm done with it. This is actually going to trigger a different workflow. The main thing this workflow does is delete the Realm app and the database that were associated with the feature branch that was just deleted. It's just doing some cleanup. So now we are in staging. Now people have different names for this. You might call it QA or pre-production or something like that. This is where you simulate the production environment and make sure that everything works together as intended. So let's head back to GitHub for a moment. I'm going to open up the Actions tab. When my teammate approved a pull request, the code was merged into staging, which triggered another workflow. So here we can see the workflow is in progress. Let me jump ahead to when the workflow has finished. All right, I'm back and the workflow has finished. Let's take a look. This workflow, again, is going to be very similar to the last one. As you can see, this workflow confirms this is a push to the staging branch. So what it's doing is creating an environment variable that stores a particular Realm app ID. Recall that in the last workflow for the pull request, we created a new Realm app just for that workflow. When we deploy to staging, we always want to push to the same staging application. This staging application remains the same for all staging workflows. This way, my teammates and I can always come in, we can do our manual testing and know that we have the latest version of the app. So this workflow is going to install the app. It's going to run the tests. Now, Realm has a new feature coming out soon that will allow you to roll back deployments. So if your tests fail, you could add a step here to automatically roll back your deployment to the previous one. At this point, you could choose to have your pipeline automation stop here. You may want to run manual tests before automatically moving to production, or you may want to limit yourself to weekly or monthly releases. Now, I've chosen to move forward with continuous deployment in my pipeline. So if the tests pass in staging, the workflow continues on to a second job that automatically pushes commits to the main branch. The only thing that really happens in this workflow is that it merges changes from the staging branch into the main branch. So now my code is in the main branch. I'm in the production stage. When commits are pushed to production, another workflow is going to be kicked off. So let's take a look at that. All right, as you can see, we've got a workflow running in our main branch. It's in progress. I will be back in just a moment when it finishes. All right, my workflow has finished. Let's see what happened in this workflow. Since this is a push to the main branch, it creates an environment variable that stores the Realm app ID of the production app. This workflow also pushes an updated copy of the Realm app to the production app. So the Realm app is now deployed. Now this workflow also does something special that none of the other workflows have done. It creates the mobile app archive file, the IPA file. In order to create the archive file, the workflow needs to install the Apple certificate and provisioning profile. Then it executes commands to generate the IPA file. And finally, it takes the IPA file and stores it in a GitHub release. So let's navigate over to the releases. So here you can see we have a GitHub release just finished 10 minutes ago, and it has a copy of the IPA file as well as the source code. So anyone can come in and grab a copy of my IPA file. My pipeline creates a GitHub release and stores the IPA file in the release. Another option would be to automatically upload the IPA to the App Store for Apple to review and approve for publication. Or you could push the IPA file to TestFlight so you could send it to your users for beta testing. Lots of options here based on what you and your team want to do. The nice thing here is that you aren't having to build the archive file locally. You don't have to worry about that one person who knows how to build the archive going on vacation or leaving the company, right? Everything is automated. So you can keep delivering new features to your users without that panic of what to do if your key person is out of the office. Now that you've seen how I built a pipeline for my Realm app, let's talk about you. How can you kickstart building your pipeline? The first thing you want to do is figure out what steps should be in your pipeline. Once you've mapped out your pipeline, it's time to start building. Starting from scratch can be challenging, but you don't have to start from scratch. I've got some resources for you. You can start with the GitHub repo for the app I showed you today. The build.yaml file contains all of the code for my pipeline. Even if you're not going to use GitHub Actions to implement your pipeline, this file can be helpful in showing how to execute the various steps from the command line. And you can take those commands and use them in other CI/CD tools. Next up, we've got the MongoDB Developer Hub, which can be found at developer.mongodb.com. I'm going to be publishing an article there soon that covers the same content I discussed today. And you can't forget about the MongoDB Realm documentation. It's got a ton of great information, and it's really helpful in figuring out what you can do with the Realm CLI. Finally, we've got the MongoDB community found at community.mongodb.com. If you have any questions as you're implementing your pipeline, this is the place to ask them. Or if you want to show off your pipeline and share your knowledge, I would love to hear that as well. So I hope to see you in the community. Creating a CI/CD pipeline can seem like a daunting task. You might say to yourself, I can't do it. But you can. You can do it. As Tom Haverford wisely said, sometimes you got to work a little so you can ball a lot. Once you put in the work of building a pipeline that works for you and your team, your app development can really fly, and you can feel confident in your releases. And that's a really big deal. Thank you.